Discover 7 hidden habits that transform you into an incredible, unstoppable force of calm. Sarah woke up at dawn, her chest tight with anxiety. The clock blinked 5:30 a.m., casting a dull light across her small kitchen, cluttered with stacks of unpaid bills and a few cold cups of forgotten coffee. She pushed aside her worries as she prepared breakfast for her father, a proud war veteran who had sacrificed so much for his country. Each sizzling pancake was less a meal and more a patchwork of her love and dedication, meant to fuel both their bodies and spirits for another grueling day in Oakwood. As she flipped the pancakes, her mind darted to the factory, her lifeline. Just yesterday, whispers floated through the town about layoffs, sending shockwaves of fear gripping the very fabric of their community. For Sarah, it wasn't just about her job, it was about her father's care, her hopes for the future, and the dreams she nourished, even when they felt like weeds suffocating beneath the heavy soil of financial suspense. At the breakfast table, her father looked at her with pride in his weary eyes. "You're doing great, kid," he said, his voice gravelly yet soothing. Each compliment felt like a warm hug, wrapping her in a moment of solace amidst the chaos, but the pressure never let up. The weight of being a single mother, a caretaker, and the sole breadwinner was more than she could sometimes bear. Just then, Mrs. Emerson, her spirited neighbor, popped her head through the door with her usual bright smile. "Sarah, you've got to listen to this," she chirped, grabbing a chair at the table. "There are 7 hidden habits that can make you an incredible force of calm." 7. Sarah raised an eyebrow, a flicker of hope igniting. Maybe, just maybe, Mrs. Emerson had the secret to help her cope with her burdens. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue with each habit Mrs. Emerson shared, like focusing on gratitude, savoring quiet moments, and leaning on community. Sarah's heart began to lighten. She recalled the laughter of neighbors sharing stories over backyard fences, the warmth of a simple wave from a passing friend, and that collective sigh of relief when burdens were shared. Each moment, Mrs. Emerson insisted, was a brick in the wall of resilience no single person could build alone. But with this newfound insight came tension. The community meeting about the factory's future was approaching, and as Sarah gazed into her father's eyes, the echoes of his teachings about honor and dignity called her to rise against injustice. Deep breaths filled the room, mingling with the scent of the pancakes, both comforting and igniting her internal fire. Just as she prepared to speak, a commotion erupted. The murmurs of unease shook the very foundation of the gathering. A shattering of glass, a rising crescendo of voices caught her off guard, including a face she recognized all too well, her estranged daughter, standing timidly in the back with tears in her eyes, caught in a tumult of confusion and fear. How could she choose? To fight for her community or to mend the rift in her family? In that moment, Sarah stood on the precipice of transformation, the weight of unresolved wounds battling the need for connection. Would she find the courage to bridge the gaps before her, or would the tumult of uncertainty hush her voice altogether? The noise around Sarah faded as she locked eyes with her daughter, Lily. Time stood still, and everything else, the gathering, the factory's future, evaporated into a haze. All that mattered was the girl standing before her, vulnerable and lost, a piece of her heart wrapped in hesitation and regret. Lily, Sarah's voice caught in her throat, thick with emotion. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in her mind, but reality was rawer, sharper, and much more chaotic than she ever anticipated. Mrs. Emerson's encouraging words echoed faintly, but they felt distant now. They were no longer just about habits and calm, they were about choices, sacrifice, and love. The choice before her was huge: embrace the daughter she had lost or fight for a community crumbling down like dry leaves in autumn. Lily stood still, clutching her jacket tightly as if holding on to the last vestiges of courage. Sarah could see the questions swirling in her eyes, questions that haunted her heart too. Why hadn't she fought harder to keep their family together? What could she say after all this time? Taking a step closer, Sarah whispered, "Are you okay?" The question felt both inadequate and profound. Lily bit her lip, fought back tears, and nodded slowly, though Sarah could tell it was a lie. "I didn't know how to, Mom, I just don't know what to say." Before she could respond, the meeting erupted again, voices of uncertainty intermingling with anger. "They can't close the factory. We all worked too hard," shouted someone from the front. Others nodded, faces contorted with concern. The weight of their shared anxiety filled the room like an unwanted fog. Sarah turned back to her father, who had watched the scene unfold with a heavy but understanding expression. He shifted in his seat, sensing her internal turmoil. "You've got to speak, kid. You can do this," he encouraged, his voice breaking slightly. The urgency gripped tightly in Sarah's chest. She felt the anxiety creeping back in, darker and larger than the fear of the factory's future. She had the power to rise as a voice, yet part of her felt paralyzed, tied to the past rather than propelled into the future. In a sudden rush, Sarah grabbed Lily's hand, the warmth of her daughter grounding her. "Together?" she asked quietly, as if daring them both to step forward into the unknown. Lily looked at her mother, then at the group of anxious faces before them. She searched for clarity amidst the chaos, and in that moment, Sarah could almost sense the connection beginning to mend. A flicker of shared determination ignited in the tension. "Together," Lily whispered, squeezing Sarah's hand tightly. Energized, Sarah turned towards the crowd, her voice trembling but fierce. "Listen up. We can't let fear silence us. We're in this together, just like we always have been." A few heads turned, curiosity mixed with surprise sparked in the air. It was a heartbeat, a moment of possibility. Maybe this was how it began, strengthened by vulnerability, united by adversity. Just then, the door swung open, interrupting the charged atmosphere. Startled, everyone turned to see a figure standing framed in the entrance. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room as whispers erupted. Sarah squinted, her heart racing. Who was this? What did they bring with them? Just as uncertainty filled her again, Sarah held on tighter to Lily. It was all unfolding before her. The battle for her family and community wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. What news would the newcomer deliver, and would it push Sarah to confront not just the challenges of her community, but also the struggle to mend her fractured family? The figure at the door stepped forward, each stride echoing with authority. As the dim light illuminated the newcomer, a familiar face emerged, a tall woman with sharp features and a determined gaze. It was Julia Bond, the mayor, who had once been a cherished friend and ally. Her presence alone felt like a gust of wind, stirring the stagnant air in the room. All eyes latched onto her, igniting a mix of curiosity, hope, and unease. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julia called, her voice a clarion against the murmurs of the crowd. "I have news that impacts us all." Her expression was grave, yet there was a glimmer of resolve that carved through the tension. Sarah instinctively tightened her grip on Lily's hand, feeling the electric pulse of anxiety in the room. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, but it was also the moment that could either bring them together or tear them further apart. "We are in a critical situation," Julia continued, her brows furrowed. "The factory's closure may seem certain, but I have been working on a plan, a last-ditch effort to keep it open and protect our community's future." A wave of murmurs surged, filling the space with uncertainty. Comments like how? And is that even possible? Peppered the crowd, as hope mingled with disbelief. Heart-pounding, Sarah's mind raced. Could it be true? Just when they thought all avenues were closed, the mayor might hold the key. With each passing second, the flickering flame of determination within her began to grow stronger. Julia raised a hand, calling for quiet. I understand you're all scared. I am too. But I need your help. We need a united front. We need to show the owners that this factory isn't just about profit, it's about people, families, dreams. Sarah glanced at Lily, whose eyes were wide with a mix of trepidation and excitement. What do you think? She whispered, and for the first time, Sarah saw a spark of hope reflected back at her. I think we should do it, Lily replied, her voice small but resolute. We can't let them take this away from us. The crowd began to shift, uncertainty being replaced by a burgeoning sense of possibility. They could hear murmurs of agreement, neighbors exchanging glances, families rallying together. In that moment, Sarah's fear began to morph into a strange blend of courage and excitement. Perhaps this could be a turning point. As Julia laid out her vision, a community outreach plan, a rally to demand change, Sarah found herself caught in a whirlpool of emotions. Yes, she was terrified, but it was less about the fear of losing the factory and more about what it symbolized: security, belonging, and hope for a brighter future. Sensing the shared momentum, Sarah stepped forward, feeling the warmth of unity buzzing around her. We can't be quiet any longer, she shouted, her heart racing with the thrill of newfound purpose. Let us show them who we are. Let us fight for our home. The room erupted with cheers, voices rising in unison, an anthem of defiance and solidarity. Lily beamed at her mother, pride reflected in their shared gaze. But even as exhilaration rushed through them, a shadow of doubt lingered at the edges of Sarah's mind. Was this rallying cry strong enough? Would their efforts be enough to truly spark change? Just then, Julia's phone buzzed, pulling her gaze down momentarily. When she looked up, her expression had shifted, anger and urgency replaced her previous determination. I just received alarming information, something that could change everything. The momentum that surged through the room faltered momentarily, the hope and excitement replaced by an unshakable tension. Sarah felt her heart sink. What news could possibly extinguish this flame they had just ignited? They had taken a step forward, but was the fight even worth it if the stakes were higher than they had imagined? As Julia continued, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on Sarah. A new battle was on the horizon, and it could upend everything they had just started to build. What did Julia know that could threaten their fight? And how could Sarah prepare for another obstacle in her quest to heal both her community and her family? Julia's voice trembled slightly as she gathered her thoughts, her eyes scanning the worried faces around her. The owners of the factory are considering a buyout from a corporation that is notorious for mechanizing jobs and slashing wages. If the deal goes through, we could lose not just the factory, but our way of life. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Sarah felt a chill seep into her bones. Memories flashed before her, families torn apart by financial strain, friends leaving town in search of jobs. Their small community was already fragile. This news threatened to shatter it entirely. What can we do? Someone in the back shouted, breaking the silence. The question hung there, heavy and urgent. People were looking to Julia, searching for a plan, a lifeline. Julia straightened her shoulders, a fierce glimmer igniting her determined gaze. We need to mobilize. We need to rally support not just from our community, but from neighboring towns, workers' unions, anyone who believes in standing against this corporate greed. Fire surged through Sarah's veins. She felt the weight of responsibility, not just for her own family but for every person in that room and beyond. What about a petition? We can gather signatures, tell our stories. Let them know we want tea back down. Yes. Lily jumped in, her voice rising with enthusiasm. And we can set up a social media campaign. Make videos about why the factory matters to us. The passion in the room was palpable. A wave of new ideas flowed, and as each person began to contribute, a sense of camaraderie took root. The rallying cries blended into a tapestry of determination. Julia raised her hand again, quieting the chaos. I love this energy. But we must be strategic. We cannot just act, we need to plan and communicate effectively. We'll meet here every week to update each other on our progress, organize rallies, and tell our stories. As the meeting continued, Sarah felt a flicker of hope turning into a flame. She shared her own experience of working at the factory, how it fed her family and kept a roof over their heads. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she held them back. Her voice grew stronger with each word. They think we're just numbers on a spreadsheet. But we're more than that. We're mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We're dreams and aspirations. And we will fight for our future. The audience erupted in applause, cheers echoing off the walls. In that moment, the sense of despair began to dissolve, replaced with a fierce unity. But as the final remarks were made, Julia's phone buzzed again, pulling her away from the festivities, her expression darkening. There is something else, she said, her voice dropping. We've heard rumors of sabotage. Some employees have already been approached with payoffs to discourage our efforts. The atmosphere shifted. Fear mixed with resolve. How far would they have to go to fight for what was theirs? Sarah could feel the tension tightening her chest again. How could they protect their cause from within? And who could they trust in this fight for their community? With questions swirling in her mind, Sarah caught Lily's worried glance. She squeezed her daughter's hand, hoping to instill courage in them both. In a world of uncertainty, one thing was clear, they were on the brink of a battle. Would they fortify their defenses, or would the odds crumble under the weight of treachery? The stakes had never been higher, but their will had never been stronger. As they prepared to launch their movement, the looming presence of betrayal cast a long, dark shadow. Did they have the strength to face it? Or would the fear of losing it all consume them? Hours after the meeting, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. The weight of the day pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She glanced over at Lily, who was asleep in her room, the soft rise and fall of her chest a comforting sight. Sarah's heart ached with the urgency of their situation, the fear gnawing at her insides. What if they lost everything? Her thoughts spiraled. She could practically hear the factory machines humming in the distance, a sound that had always felt like home. But that home felt threatened now, fragile like a snowflake in the warm sun. Determined to get some clarity, she slipped out into the small kitchen where the faint glow of the streetlights illuminated her way. The clinking of mugs and the soft breeze through the window mixed with her racing heart. She poured herself a cup of tea, seeking warmth and comfort. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Julia. We need to talk. Important. She typed back quickly, I can be there in 15. Her feet moved faster than her mind, the chill of uncertainty gripping her. Instinctively, she grabbed her jacket and a flashlight before heading out into the cool night air. The factory loomed ahead, the structure a dark silhouette against the starry sky. The closer she got, the more electricity buzzed around her, an unspoken agreement, a pact among those fighting for their livelihoods. Julia was already outside, pacing like a lioness on the prowl. What is going on? Sarah asked, concern knitting her brow. Julia took a deep breath. I spoke with some coworkers today, and I think there's more at play here. A few people have decided to sell out, but they don't realize the damage they're causing us all. What do you mean? There's self-talk of someone close to us leaking information to the corporation. They're trying to undermine the morale here, sow doubt among our ranks. Fear clawed at Sarah's chest, but she stood tall. We can't let that happen. We've come too far, and we can't let a few bad apples ruin our fight. Julia nodded, her fiery spirit palpable. Exactly. We need more than just a petition. We need to expose this. We need to find out who is behind it. As they shared suspicions and brainstormed their next steps, the sense of urgency intensified. Sarah couldn't shake the worry that lurked in the corners of her mind. Who could they trust? Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mark, another worker from the factory, a shy man whose demeanor usually leaned toward quiet. Sorry to interrupt, he said hesitantly, his eyes darting between them. I overheard something in the break room. What did you hear? Julia leaned closer, her focus sharp. Mark faltered, glancing over his shoulder, uncertainty flooding his expression. I think someone is planning to sabotage the next rally. They want to make us look bad. Sarah's heart raced. We can't allow that. No, Julia agreed, but we need to act fast. This isn't just a fight for our jobs. It's a fight for our dignity. But as they plotted their strategy, Sarah felt an unsettling wave wash over her. What if the betrayal ran deeper than they realized? What if people they thought were on their side were actually the ones tipping the balance? With the stakes this high, each decision mattered more than ever. They were stepping into the crossfire of a war they hadn't asked for, but they wouldn't back down without a fight. Sarah took a deep breath. Could they really outmaneuver the treachery that lingered in their midst? And what would it mean for her, for Lily, if they failed? The familiar question echoed in her mind, who could they trust? As they forged a plan, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. They were about to uncork a bottle of resistance, but would it be enough to withstand the tempest ahead? The night was still alive with whispers of doubt, but Sarah felt a flicker of determination pierce the fog of uncertainty. Her mind raced as she and Julia crafted their plan, a tightrope walk between caution and courage. Mark listened intently, his wide eyes reflecting the fear that clung to all of them. They had to move quickly, but with precision. What about tonight? Sarah suggested, her heart pounding with every word. We could talk to a few more workers. See who is with us. Julia nodded, already pulling out her phone. I'll message a few. If we can rally support, maybe we can expose whoever is trying to sabotage us before it's too late. But how do we trust anyone? Mark's voice trembled, breaking the night's tension. What if the leaks are closer than we think? A shiver crawled down Sarah's spine. We can't think like that, she said, forcing herself to be the pillar of strength. We need to build awareness and solidarity. Let us focus on our shared goals. As they scattered into the darkness, the night felt thick with unspoken fears. Sarah found herself glancing over her shoulder, half expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. Every rustle of leaves seemed amplified, every distant sound a potential threat. She pressed on, the familiar streets of her neighborhood feeling alien with the burden of the unknown weighing her down. The first door they approached was Charlie's, an old-timer who knew every story worth telling. Sarah knocked, barely breathing until she heard shuffling inside. When the door swung wide open, Charlie's tired eyes danced with recognition. You two look like you're plotting something. We are, Julia said, stepping forward. We need you to stand with us. There are whispers, betrayals even. We think someone is trying to sabotage our next move. Charlie knitted his brows, worry etched on his face. I've heard some chatter too. People are getting restless. But you're saying someone is using that against us? It's more than just that. If we don't come together, it's over for us. We need to act united, Sarah urged, feeling the gravity of Charlie's history and experience. With a slow nod, Charlie stepped aside. Then let us gather everyone. The more voices, the harder we are to silence. As more workers trickled into Charlie's living room, the air thickened with tension, voices rising and falling like a crashing wave. Sarah felt a strange unity forming, a wall of determined faces that sparked recognition in every heart. They were in this together, but through the rallying voices, one nagging thought clawed at her. Was there unity enough to battle an unseen enemy? Could they truly trust each other when shadows danced around every corner? Listen up! Sarah shouted to gather their attention, adrenaline rushing. We've got each other's backs or we'll lose everything. I know it's scary, but what's worse, a fight with our heads held high or letting fear let us fall? The group visibly straightened, some nodding, others meeting each other's eyes in shared understanding. The fight for dignity ignited something deep within them all. A flame of hope flickered to life, but then, a distant shout echoed outside. A familiar voice, angry and urgent. Sarah's heart dropped as she recognized it. It was Mike, their colleague, his temper flaring at something unseen. Stay here, Sarah said. We can't let this turn into a brawl. There was an electricity in the air, a tangible reminder of the risks they were taking. As she stepped outside, the moonlight cast long shadows on the ground. Fear twisted in her gut, but hope flickered just behind it. Mike! She called, her voice steady despite the chaos. What is going on? For a moment, everything slowed, and the question hung in the cool night air. But then she saw the tension in his shoulders, the fire in his eyes, and something in Sarah knew the storm was only just beginning. Would this skirmish lead them to betrayal, or could it end up being the spark of a revolution? As she braced herself for the confrontation ahead, a single thought surged within her. Would they stand together against the storm, or would they fracture under pressure? The answer felt critical, the stakes impossibly high. Sarah stepped outside, her heart racing. The night was much more than just a backdrop. It felt alive, almost sentient, swirling around her with unknown secrets. The flickering porch light above cast a glow that illuminated the scene, showing Mike's taut figure standing under the street lamp. What is going on? She asked, her voice cutting through the tension. Man, it's all going to hell! Mike shouted, his hands gesturing wildly. You won't believe what I just heard. There's talk of more layoffs. They're acting like we're just numbers on a sheet and some people aren't taking it quietly. Sarah's chest tightened. The very thing they feared was happening, the corporate coldness creeping like a thief in the night. What do you mean? Mike stepped closer, urgency palpable in his every movement. I heard them in the break room, whispering about cutting the dead weight. They're playing us against each other, trying to figure out who they can throw under the bus. Panic washed over Sarah, but she fought to grip it. We have to stop this, she said, grounding herself. We've got to make sure everyone knows what is happening. But how? Mike pushed back, frustration evident. They'll deny it. They'll lie. And who knows if anyone will even believe us? Watching the intensity in his features, Sarah felt a surge of clarity. We need evidence. If we can record them or get someone else to hear what they're planning, we can use that to rally everyone around us. We need to show them we won't back down. Are you sure we can trust Charlie? Mike's brow furrowed. He sounded so close to management. What if he's Charlie as one of us? She interjected firmly. He wouldn't betray his own. We need everyone to see this fight is for our future. Not just for ourselves, but for all of us. As they spoke, the group inside began to murmur, sensing the urgency in Sarah and Mike's voices. Julia peeked outside, her expression a mix of fear and determination. What is happening? Plans for more layoffs, Sarah replied, urgency seeping into her tone. We have to make sure everyone is on board. If we don't act now but we're just human, Julia interrupted, her voice rising. What can we do against their machines, their power? They have money and influence. Mike stepped forward, the fire in his belly igniting. What we have is strength. Our numbers, our voices. We can't let this spiral without a fight. Exactly. Sarah gripped their shoulders, her joy rising. This is our time to band together, to show them we're not afraid. If they want a fight, we'll bring it to them. A spine-tingling realization washed over the group. They were not just individuals, they were a collective force, raw and unyielding. The stakes were high, and so was the potential fallout. As they gathered back around, an electric anticipation thickened the air. Word spread quickly, voices rising in solidarity, but a new unease pushed against them. The worried faces of the group reflected the fear that their unity might falter in the face of adversity. Just then, a loud crash echoed from within the building, drawing their attention. The source remained hidden, shrouded in the sudden tension of uncertainty. What was that? Mark's voice cracked, fear creeping back in. Sarah's heart skipped. I don't know, was it merely a disturbance, or something more insidious? The question hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. They were all aware that the enemies within the shadows were closing in, but now they sensed the urgency of their next steps would determine everything. Everybody inside. Sarah called, urgency drenching her words. We don't have time to waste. As they scrambled toward the door, determination melded with anxiety, all keenly aware that the months ahead could either lead to their victory or their undoing. Would this unexpected twist forge them into solidarity, or would it shatter the fragile thread binding them together? Sarah knew one thing, their true test had only just begun. Sarah led the group into the building, her heart pounding. The atmosphere, once filled with hope, had shifted. The air felt thick with fear, and faint whispers crowded the corners of the room. They gathered in a small conference space, their ugly fluorescent lights buzzing above them, amplifying their anxiety. What was that noise? Julia asked, her voice small as she shifted nervously from foot to foot. It sounded like something fell, or maybe Mark started, but his eyes darted around, uncertain of where to direct his fear. Or maybe someone is trying to sabotage us, Mike interjected, his frustration evident. We can't afford to be paranoid, but we also can't ignore that something feels very wrong here. The group fell silent, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. Sarah took a deep breath, glancing at each face, absorbing their worry. They were counting on her, and somehow, she'd have to lighten the load on their hearts. Listen, she finally said, her voice steady yet warm, I know we're scared. I am too. But panic won't help us. We need to focus on what we can control. If what might hurt is true, we need to expose this before it's too late. Exposing it won't help if we're too late, Julia whispered, her eyes glistening. Then we speed up our plan, Sarah declared, glancing over at Mike. Let us get our evidence tonight. We can't wait. If nothing else, we have to warn our colleagues. They deserve to know the truth. As the group nodded and murmurs of agreement rose, Sarah felt the adrenaline igniting their resolve. They were scared, yes, but they were also fiercely determined not to let their fear consume them. Okay, Mike said, his voice growing stronger. Let us split up. We can cover more ground that way. He glanced at Charlie, who had just joined them at the doorway, eager yet hesitant. If we can get a hold of something concrete, it might wake everyone up. Charlie stepped forward, his expression serious. You know it's risky. If we get caught, we don't have time to overthink this, Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. We need to act now. We can't let them control our future. Not without a fight. The tension, once thick, transformed into a palpable tension of purpose, each person shedding their fear to step into something greater. A bond solidified in that moment. They weren't just co-workers, they were allies. Let us meet back here in an hour, Mike instructed, eyes glinting with the spark of determination. As they split off into the chaos of the building, the uncertainty swelled around them, morphing into something more profound, a sense of danger interwoven with hope. Walking into the unknown had never been so intoxicating. Sarah moved with swift purpose through the halls, her mind racing. Flashes of her colleagues' faces, those with families, dreams, and bills filled her thoughts. They couldn't be silenced. Not now. As she approached the break room, the familiar scent of stale coffee hung in the air. She paused, listening intently. Low voices seeped out, curling around her like thick fog. Heart racing, she carefully pushed the door ajar, just enough to peek inside. What she saw shocked her to her core. 3 managers huddled around the table, papers cluttered in front of them, as they casually discussed names. And if we take out Charlie first, one of them said, the others will fall in line. Bile rose in Sarah's throat. She barely breathed, her mind whirring. This was the evidence she desperately needed. But she had to be sure what is happening. The voice of Angela, one of the newer employees, floated through, confused and concerned. Sarah's heart sank. Angela was in over her head. If she got pulled into this mess, it could decide everything. Should she step in now, before it escalated? Or sneak away to gather her own proof? The decision loomed as shadows fell outside, leaning into uncertainties that could crash down like dominoes. A choice was made as she gritted her teeth. Taking a stance now could turn the tide against them, but it carried consequences too fierce to ignore. Would she summon the courage to expose the truth now, or would this conflict consume them all? Sarah felt the potential unraveling all around her. Time was running out, and each heartbeat echoed a desperate question. Would she step into the light, or sink back into the shadows? Sarah's instincts screamed at her to act, yet every fiber in her being trembled with hesitation. She could hear the conversation inside. Phrases like, take out Charlie, echoed like a hammer striking against her resolve. Angela's confusion tugged at her heart, each beat reminding her of the lives that hung in the balance. With a shaky breath, she pushed the door wider, stepping into the dim light of the break room. The sudden movement met a sharp intake of breath from Angela, whose wide eyes mirrored Sarah's own fear. Sarah, what are you doing here? Angela's voice quavered, the questions piling up in her gaze. Stay back. Sarah hissed, urgency coating her words. But before any more could pass, the managers turned, their expressions shifting from mild annoyance to shock. What is this? Eavesdropping. One of them shot, his face twisting into a cold sneer. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but she couldn't back down now. This was everything. I know what you are planning, she said, her voice trembling but firm. You can't do this, you don't know anything, the manager snapped, his eyes narrowing, threatening. Actually, I do, she replied, taking a step closer. Angela flinched at the sight of her courage, her own fear stifled by a growing flame of defiance within her. The tension thickened as the other two managers exchanged furtive glances. "Let us not make things harder for you," another said smoothly, his tone deceptively calm. "You wouldn't want to end up like Charlie, now would you?" "Enough!" Sarah shouted, the words bursting forth like a dam breaking. "This ends now." Angela's shoulders squared, stepping beside Sarah. "You can't run over us. We work hard and deserve better." The surprise flared in the manager's eyes, briefly eclipsed by the malevolence underneath. "You're both out of your depth. You don't know who you're dealing with." "But we do know," Sarah countered, feeling the weight of their solidarity. "And we won't let fear silence us." The sound of footsteps echoing down the hall had Sarah's heart racing again. Was it Mike and the others returning? Would they be able to help? In the thickening silence, the managers exchanged tense murmurs. They were cornered now, realizing their threats had begun to backfire. "Get out while you can," the first one warned, his voice low and dangerously calm. "You might find things get messy if you stay." But Sarah stood firm, shaking her head. "You think threats will scare us away? We're not backing down." Her heart thundered with each word, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Then you're dumber than I thought," he sneered, pulling out his phone as if to call for reinforcements. "No!" Angela shouted, a mixture of fear and anger clear in her voice. "We know you're in the wrong." Just then, the door swung open behind them, and Mike, Charlie, and Julia rushed in, their faces set with concern. "What is going on?" Mike demanded, scanning the tense room. "We need to expose them," Sarah called out, the urgency punctuating her words. "They've been planning to take us down." The group of them now stood together, forming a united front. The atmosphere shifted, the strength of their camaraderie entwining them against the darkness. The managers, realizing the tide was turning, began to retreat. "You regret this," one warned, but the fire of determination flickered in every heart present. "Not if we stand together," Julia declared, a fierce glint lighting her features. As the managers slinked out, the air crackled with tension and relief. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The fight was far from over. They regained their footing, hope flourishing in the cracks of fear. "What is our next move?" she asked, glancing around at her team, but answers to this question seemed to drift beyond reach, with shadows of possible reprisals growing larger. Would they be able to uncover the truth before it was too late? The next chapter of their fight was unfolding, and no one could predict how it would end. But one thing was clear, they would face it together, come what may. Sarah took a deep breath. The adrenaline from the confrontation still throbbed through her veins, but she could feel something shifting within their group, a spark igniting the very air around them. Each person standing together felt like a promise that they wouldn't back down, no matter the odds stacked against them. "All right," she said, gathering their attention, "we've cited the problems. We've faced down the threats. But we must act now." Her heart raced with every word as the truth hung heavy in the room. "If they think we'll go quietly into that dark night, they've got another thing coming." Mike stepped forward, his fierce expression affirming her words. "Right. They're flinging us into chaos, but together, we are stronger. We need to spread the word about what we heard tonight. Rally the troops and gather support." Julia nodded vigorously. "We mobilize. Let us get everyone involved, friends, families, anyone who cares about this factory and our livelihoods." She looked around, meeting the determined faces of her co-workers. "Let us create a movement, not just for ourselves but for everyone who works here. Hours passed like minutes as they fought to pen down their rallying cry. They sent messages to everyone in the factory, urging them to join a meeting the next evening, determined to unveil the truth and stand strong against the looming threat. As Sarah made her way home that night, the moon hung large and bright in the sky, illuminating her path. For the first time in months, tiredness flowed from her, chased away by a burgeoning light of hope. She stepped inside her house, where the familiar smell of lavender hung in the air. Holding back a sense of calm, she quietly made her way to Lily's room, finding her daughter wrapped snug under a colorful blanket. The weight of the day had drained Sarah, but she smiled down at the peaceful face she loved more than anything. As exhaustion overcame her, she promised herself that they would fight. They'd keep her safe, keep their family intact, and carve out a future worth living. The next evening, the factory cafeteria buzzed with voices, a mixture of fear, support, and solidarity. As Sarah settled in, a flood of colleagues and friends filled the space to overflowing. Familiar faces, united by purpose, sparkled with determination as they whispered among themselves. She caught sight of Angela, who looked steadier now, joined by others eager to support their cause. "Thank you for coming," Sarah began, her voice tinged with both gratitude and urgency. "We all know why we're here." We heard the whispers of betrayal and division. Heads nodded, the atmosphere thickening with resolve. "But we are not just workers, we are a community. Each story here is a brick in the foundation of our fight. We cannot let them tear that down." A chorus of agreement erupted, voices swelling in the air like an anthem of defiance. It wrapped around Sarah like a shield, invigorating her spirit. Mike stepped forward, swiping a hand through the air. "We need to be as loud as possible. We'll spread the word through social media, videos, flyers, anything to show that factory and community are synonymous with each other. People must know what's at stake." "I'll grab my camera," Angela shouted, inspiration lit in her eyes. "And I'll tell everyone my story, how this factory put food on my table." The enthusiasm was contagious. As they rallied, plans began to hatch like popcorn in a pot. Each voice became part of the swelling tide of purpose that had started to forge a path toward change. In the following weeks, the energy of their movement grew. They filmed testimonials, painted banners, reached out to neighboring towns, and each time they connected with another heart, it filled them with endless ripples of hope. But as they gathered steam, Sarah remained conscious of the shadows lurking nearby. Doubts flickered. Had they done enough? Were the saboteurs lingering too closely? It was during a particularly charged meeting that the door swung open, and the air shifted. A familiar figure stood in the doorway, Charlie's otherwise calm demeanor edged with tension. He rushed in, breathless, his face pale. "They're planning something. The owners are coming in for a routine check tomorrow. I overheard them talking about using that meeting for damage control, a way to quell all our voices." The room erupted into a flurry of conversation. Fear threaded through the air as discussion struggled to crystallize into a coherent plan. "Then we call them out," Julia shouted. "We show them we're not backing down. We need to be there with our evidence." Sarah's heart raced. She felt the pulse of their collective fear and fury. "We stand as one. If we have to, we face them directly." As the night wore on, they solidified their strategy, fueled by determination. The sense of unity had never been stronger, and even as they faced the unknown, hope soared like a bird freed from its cage. Once their plans were set, Sarah wasted no time finding Lily that evening. As darkness engulfed the sky once more, she found her daughter waiting on their porch, a sliver of moonlight dancing in her stillness. "Mom?" Lily asked, nestled under their warm blanket, offering the comfort of home. Sarah sank beside her, wrapping her arms around her in a fierce embrace. "We're going to fight, honey. For our family. For everyone." Lily's little hands tightened around her mother's arm. We'll win then, right? Sarah chuckled softly, tears brimming her eyes as she whispered, yes, we will. Together. And in that moment, they were not just a mother and daughter, they were a force of love, courage, and unwavering hope. Tomorrow would be a test. But as the sun began to rise, it brought with it a promise of a new day, one that shone brightly with the possibility of transformation. Now, I need your help to keep the momentum going. You need to subscribe now to our channel, so you don't miss the next exclusive story. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, every click matters. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending, because I want to hear from you, and don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Each action drives our community further, and only true fans understand how important it is to support our channel.